Yesterday, April 2nd, 2026, Trump signed an executive order that most Americans scrolled right past, and it placed a 100% tariff on pharmaceutical drugs imported into this country. Not a threat this time, not a true social postined order effective immediately, with the possibility of escalating to 250% by the end of the year if certain companies refuse to play ball. You might be thinking, sure, more tariffs, same story. But what's actually unfolding right now is something different from anything we've seen in modern American economic history. What Trump is setting in motion is a silent economic war. The kind that doesn't make the front page. The kind that plays out in central bank boardrooms and currency agreements and back-channel deals between governments. The kind where ordinary Americans eventually open their wallets and wonder what happened. So, let's walk through what's actually happened over the past year, what's coming next, and why this matters to your life directly. Many of you are aware of what's been happening with the channel. If you feel like supporting, a link in the description. I've spent months researching what's coming between 2026 and 2030, and I put it all into an ebook called The Next Global Shift: How to Stay Ahead of Economic Collapse and War. The economies, the conflicts, the moves you need to make. Links in the description. Now, let's get into the video. A year ago, Trump stood in the Rose Garden and announced the highest American tariffs in nearly a century, calling it Liberation Day. His advisor, Peter Navarro, put a number on it, predicting $600 billion a year flowing into the Treasury. The promise was simple. Factories come back. The national debt comes down. Prices dropped for everyone. What actually landed was something else entirely. The tariffs generated $264 billion in customs duties across all of 2025, which sounds large, until you realize that represented just 4.9% of total tax receipts for the year, nowhere near the trillions that had been advertised. And nearly 90% of the costs, according to economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, got absorbed by American businesses and American consumers, not by China, not by the European Union, by the people buying groceries and cars and clothes right here at home. The Tax Foundation calculated that the average American household paid $100 more in 2025 for the exact same goods they'd been buying the year before, and projects another $600 more per household in 2026, even after the Supreme Court knocked most of the tariffs out. Manufacturing employment didn't recover either. During Trump's first full year back in the White House, factories shed 98,000 jobs, and a University of Toronto economist told PBS that under the best possible conditions, manufacturing employment would need a full decade just to climb back to where it started. None of that matched the promise made from the Rose Garden. And then came February 20th, 2026, which changed everything. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, the legal foundation Trump had used for most of his tariff regime, does not actually authorize the president to impose tariffs. This knocked out the legal basis for a staggering amount of collected revenue. The government had pulled in $166 billion from over 33,000 businesses under authorities. The court now considers unconstitutional, and the Penn-Wharton budget model estimates up to $175 billion may need to be refunded. More than 25,000 importers, including Costco and FedEx, have already filed for their money back. Hours after the ruling came down, Trump invoked Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 and announced a new flat 10% global tariff valid for 150 days, running out on July 24, 2026. He's threatening to push that to 15% before it expires. July 24th is a date worth writing down because whatever replaces that temporary tariff will define the next chapter of this entire story. And new Section 301 investigations are already running that could produce country-specific tariffs well beyond anything we've seen so far. The tariff battlefield is really just the surface layer, though. Underneath it, two other conflicts are running simultaneously, and they carry far more long-term weight. The first one is the Federal Reserve. On January 9, 2026, the Department of Justice served the Federal Reserve with grand jury subpoenas targeting Jerome Powell, the man Trump himself appointed back in 2018. The official justification involved cost overruns on a building renovation project. But Powell went on camera and put his reading of it plainly. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president. What followed that statement was striking. All three living former Federal Reserve chairs, Bernanke, Yellen, and Greenspan, signed a joint statement backing Powell's defiance. Three people who rarely agree on anything standing together on this one point. Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, not a Democrat, told reporters directly that a fight between the executive branch and the Federal Reserve is essentially a machine designed to push interest rates higher, not lower, and that nobody needed that right now. Paula's term as Fed chair expires in May 2026, and Trump has already nominated former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh to take his place. Senator Elizabeth Warren called that nomination the latest step in Trump's attempt to seize control of the Fed, while Republican Senator Thom Tillis declared he'd vote against any nominee until the DOJ probe gets dropped. Capital Economics has already predicted that whoever sits in that chair next is going to clash with Trump almost immediately, because inflation is staying above the Fed's 2% target, and the math simply doesn't allow for the aggressive rate cuts Trump wants. The Geneva Center for Security Policy has been direct about what happens if that independence breaks down. Undermining the Federal Reserve's credibility could deal a striking and irreversible blow to the credibility of the US dollar. And that's the bridge into the third and quietest battlefield of all. The dollar itself is under pressure in ways that most people watching cable news tonight won't hear explained. About 58% of the world's foreign exchange reserves sit in US dollars, according to the IMF. Critical commodities like oil and gold get priced in dollars. The whole architecture of global trade runs through dollar-based systems, which gives the United States what a former French finance minister once called an exorbitant privilege, the ability to print the currency the whole world needs to do business. That privilege is worth more to American power than any aircraft carrier. Back in November 2024, Trump posted on Truth Social, threatening 100% tariffs on the BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the UAE. If any of them tried to create a rival currency, his words were, "We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs." At a BRICS summit around that same time, Vladimir Putin offered his own plain summary of the situation. "It's not us who refuse to use the dollar, but if they don't let us work, what can we do? we are forced to search for alternatives. Brad Setzer, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and a former Treasury Department economist, identified exactly what's wrong with Trump's approach, writing that coercing countries into using the dollar is actually a long-run threat to the dollar's global role. His point was simple. Once using the dollar feels like a political obligation rather than a neutral financial choice, countries start calculating the cost of finding an exit. BRICS is building those exits right now. A payment system called BRICS Pay, designed to process cross-border transactions without touching dollar-based infrastructure, is reportedly moving toward becoming operational in 2026. India's central bank has proposed linking digital currencies across BRICS nations so countries can settle trade directly in their own currencies, cutting dollars out of the loop entirely. These countries together represent 36% of global GDP and 45% of the world's population. That's not a fringe movement. And then came the secondary tariffs, a weapon Trump introduced with barely any public debate. On January 12, 2026, Trump announced that any country doing business with Iran would face a 25% tariff on all their trade with the United States, effective immediately. China buys roughly 80% of Iran's oil, which meant Beijing was immediately in the crosshairs. The Chinese embassy responded that the use of tariffs as coercion was not a solution, and that Beijing would take all necessary measures to defend its interests. Secondary tariffs on countries buying Russian oil have followed a similar pattern. What this amounts to is using the dollar's central position in global trade as a threat against any country that refuses to follow American foreign policy. And the Geneva Center for Security Policy has warned that every time Washington does this, it accelerates the very search for alternatives it's trying to prevent. So, here's where everything converges and why it matters to you specifically. By July 24, 2026, the 10% global tariff under Section 122 expires and cannot be extended under that statute. Trump will need to replace it through Section 232 negotiations, or through the Section 301 investigations that are already underway across multiple industries and multiple countries. Either path means another round of trade disruption. Pharmaceutical tariffs hit 100% this week and carry the threat of rising to 200% or more before the year ends. Semiconductor tariffs are already targeting NVIDIA and AMD chips. The trade policy environment, which GM CFO noted has cost his company $310 billion in 2025 alone, keeps shifting in ways that make long-range business planning nearly impossible. At the same time, in May, the Senate faces a confirmation battle over the next Federal Reserve chair that will essentially decide whether American monetary credibility survives the decade. That credibility is the invisible foundation beneath everything. Your mortgage rate, your retirement account, the purchasing power of every dollar you hold. And in the background, BRICS Pay gets closer to live. More countries quietly redirect trade flows. The dollar's share of global reserves, already sitting at 58% and drifting lower, keeps moving in the same direction. What GM CFO said about tariffs being lower in 2026 than in 2025 might turn out to be accurate on paper. But the erosion of supply chains, of investment confidence, of America's financial relationships with the rest of the world, none of that reverses when a tariff rate ticks down. Trust takes years to build and hours to lose. The silent economic war isn't something coming in the future. It started. The battles are running right now in courtrooms, in Senate hearings, in currency agreements being signed between countries that most Americans have never thought about. The outcome will determine whether your savings hold their value, whether your prescription costs climb or fall, and whether America holds on to the financial position it has occupied since World War II, or watches it quietly erode over the next 20 years. Nobody on cable news is connecting all of these threads tonight, but now you have the full picture. This is the video today. If you want my ebook, link in the description.